Aronia Organic Private Limited, Dr. Arunbha Ghosh, Chief Executive Officer, Council on Energy, Environment and Water, Mr. Sanjay Kishore Srivastava, GGM, Chief Carbon Management and Sustainability Group, ONGC, Mr. Anand Desai, Chairman, CI, South Gujarat Zonal Council, Managing Director, Anupam Rasayan India Limited, Dr. Hitesh Doshi, Chairman and Managing Director, Wari Engineers Limited, CII members, non-CII members, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Gujarat State Council, I welcome you all to the Gujarat State session at 15th Sustainability Summit. It's my honor to be a part of this session when the thought leaders have come together to discuss sustainability with the proactive thoughts of discussing the action agenda of the next decade, especially when the world is evolving with the new normals. And I'm also proud to be a part of the Gujarat State session with the theme of leading the way climate change mitigation. Gujarat is the first in Asia and fourth national government department in the world to set up a Department of Climate Change, and climate change mitigation has been the core along with the adoption efforts. Mr. S.J. Haider, IAS Principal Secretary, Climate Change Department, Government of Gujarat, will be addressing this session after the panel discussion, as he has to be meet up with other important unavoidable engagement in the morning session. I am sure his address will be at a great value to the conversation that we are hosting today in a real context, as integration of the vision of the government and industry members is key to accomplish the mission like climate change mitigation. We are also thankful to Sri Ganpat Singh Wasawa, Honorable Minister, Tribe Development, Forest, Women and Child Welfare, Government of Gujarat, and Sri Saurabhbhai Patel, Honorable Minister, Energy, Government of Gujarat, for their kind support. Due an urgent meeting all called by the Chief Minister of Gujarat, they will not be able to join today's session. Gujarat has been always known for the entrepreneurial nature and a leadership quality, chartering change, paving the way forward. While the democratic country like India, that is looked upon the growth of the high GDP growth to achieve 5 trillion economy, the sustainability development in the way forward. With the diverse industrial expertise, and every state in India is working to give the best to cater the domestic and global market. Government, Gujarat itself is the most diverse state in the terms of various sectors catering the global market, like leaders in auto parts manufacturing, engineering, chemical, pharma, ceramic, cement, textile, diamond, shipbreaking, oil and gas, and many more sector. And now also in leading in the renewable energy. All of this, one state with an extraordinary infrastructure at the longest coastal line of the country. With the announcement of the new industrial policy by Honorable Chief Minister of Gujarat, Sri Vijayabhai Rupani, has clearly outlined his vision for the growth of the state and the sector where the investment potential is high. He has targeted balanced growth in industry, including the manufacturing and service, which will ensure overall sustainable growth as well. I truly appreciate the proactive approach of the government. With the growth comes is the responsibility. This session at the 15th Sustainability Summit is an initiative to demonstrate the need of balancing the focus sustainability development along with the aim of achieving industrial growth at every state level. Climate change is the biggest global challenge in the world is facing. This is the time to act, to converse and save the future generation, and it has to begin at your doorstep. We don't know whether the impact of climate change that will facing are reversible or not. but action and contribution of every stakeholder to be isn't industry, government, and community or individual or utmost importance of mitigate the climate change. I look forward to today's session with the distinguished change leaders and eminent speakers of the to learn from the best practice for the climate change mitigation and vision towards the action agenda for the next decade. Once again, I welcome you all to the Gujarat State session at 15th Sustainability Summit. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Distinguished members, good morning. Piyush Bhai rightly said that Gujarat has always been known for the entrepreneurial nature and leadership qualities, chartering change and paving the way forward. You can see in the various ranking of Government of India also that Gujarat is always in the among the top 5 or maximum among the top 10. And leading the way forward, climate change department is a classic example of the proactive leadership approach of Government of Gujarat. It is the first country to form such department among the Forest Department of India. Gujarat also ranked first in earning carbon credits under clean development and resilient growth. You will also agree that for long-term sustainability, industrial development must be based on optimal use of natural resources and not their exploitation, which many of the parts of the world has done. Climate change is what we all are experiencing across the globe. Change in the weather conditions, increased heat, melting of glaciers, increasing sea levels, and all these has affected the livelihood and ecosystems. A study shows that in last 20 years, and small microbes have reduced substantially. It is almost like half what was in 90s. This has serious impact on the ecosystem. This is the result of excessive use of pesticides and insecticides on our food grains. Mitigation of climate change involves reducing the flow of heat-trapping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, either by reducing sources of these gases, like the burning of fossil fuels for electricity, heat, or transport, or enhancing the sinks that accumulate and store these gases, such as the ocean, soil, and the forest. Conservation of the nature and nature resources is the key to fight the climate change mitigation. In order to encourage greater compliance with environmental standards and support development of latest sustainable industrial infrastructure to reduce air and water pollution, Gujarat State Industrial Policy has provided incentives for industries complying to the green and sustainable infrastructure. If you see the new Gujarat industrial policy, they have given lot of thrust emphasis on the sustainable industrial growth. The policy also encourages green practices and environmental audit to MSME. State emission monitoring system, industrial buildings with green rating, which even CII helps under our Indian Green Building Council initiatives. The policy also includes the development of green estate at 25% of project cost for setup, relocation, retrofitting of existing pollution industrial units into green industrial estate, and support the plan for relocation and retrofitting of existing pollution units into green industrial estate. Government of Gujarat has given in the policy to sanction a subsidy up to 80 lakhs of rupees for such industrial estate. Global climate change mitigation goals cannot be met without the inclusion of forest, reducing deforestation and forest degradation, reforestation, and improved forest management. Forests are often overlooked as readily available carbon removal solutions. Globally, if you see around 30% of CO2 emissions are removed by terrestrial ecosystem, namely by forest. Improved forest management offers large mitigation opportunities, many of which could be implemented rapidly without changes in land use or tenure for fossil fuel reserves. Here, I am very happy to share that forest area spread in the state of Gujarat is of almost 21,859 square kilometer, out of which 14,571 square kilometer is reserved forest, 2,898 square kilometer is for protected forest, and 4,389 square kilometer for unclassed forest. Aiming to increase the green cover further, Forest and Environment Department at Government of Gujarat has introduced initiative called as One Mahotsav at every district level. Not only at district level, even at the and everywhere, every year we celebrate World Environment Day as a One Mahotsav Day, and we try to uh, plant almost like millions of trees every year. In the year 2019, forest cover in the state of Gujarat has increased by 100.33 square kilometer as compared to the previous assessment reported in 2017. Main reason for increase in forest cover in the state are plantation and conservative activities. But we have still long way to go if we want to be reach the level of Bhutan or Maldives or even our northeastern states like Assam and Meghalaya. Gujarat Forest and Environment Department has formed Gujarat Forest Research Foundation, managing and developing research in forestry and wildlife, and also specialized subjects like tree genetics, tissue culture, application of biotechnology, etc. So if you can see in government of Gujarat, not only we talk about industries, growth, but also we talk about forest, how to increase the forest area, how to develop different tissue culture. Uh, last year I visited a delegation which was accompanied from Israel. So government of Gujarat is very closely working with government of Israel to work on tissue culture, application of biotechnology, etc. Not only this, the Asiatic lion, wild ass sanctuary have their last reserve in the forests of Gir and Little Ren of Kutch, respectively in Gujarat. Four national parks, 23 wildlife sanctuaries, and one conservation reserve constitute the protected area network and of the state covering 8.83% of its geographical area. These factors have bestowed that the government with rich flora and fauna diversity along with the sustainable industrial growth. The same thing even our honorable PM has uh, stressed upon, and also we are diversity forest at even the Statue of Unity. Governments, industries, and communities are already working towards bringing the change to mitigate the climate change. But we have a long way to go to offer better world to future generations. Here, I would also like to stress upon adoption of more sustainable alternate source of energy, as the geographical condition of India holds unlimited opportunity to adopt this alternative source of renewable energy, especially the solar energy. The National Institute of Solar Energy has estimated the potential of solar power in the country to be around 750 gigawatts. And the government of India has already set up an ambitious target to achieve 100 gigawatt by 2022. And I am glad to share that Gujarat is the front leader in solar energy generation in India. The 2009 Solar Power of Gujarat policy framework, financing mechanism, and incentives has contributed to a green investment climate in the state and target for grid connected solar power. The state has commissioned Asia's largest solar village of Charankha in Patan district. Our state has plans to generate solar power by putting solar panels along the Narmada canals. As part of this scheme, the state has already commissioned 1 megawatt canal solar power project on the branch of Narmada Canal near the village of Chandrasan in Mehsana district. Adding another feeder in the cap, Gujarat has received highest ever application for the installation of residential rooftop solar system during the past 4 to 5 months period. Even Gujarat government has last month only approved 1,000 megawatt solar project at the ambitious Dholera city project. On the top in the list with the 430.24 megawatt of installed capacity as on 31st January 2020 only for the rooftop solar. In recently, after the announcement of Gujarat Industrial Policy of 2020, it has very categorically emphasized and helped to adopt renewable energy for MSME sector. Earlier state has introduced a special solar policy under which MSME are eligible to set up rooftop solar power and provision is made to purchase surplus power from them. Considering the difficulties faced, government taking a very proactive step with a view to further ease the process of utilizing rooftop solar power in MSME has increased the power cycle for calculation of consumption of units from 15 minutes to 11 hours. That is from morning 7 a.m. till evening 6 p.m. And also they have increased the power of purchase price of surplus power supply from MSMEs from 1.75 rupees per unit to 2.25 per unit. The new Gujarat industrial policy has also introduced incentives for industries opting for regular energy audits and green certification. On the other hand, Gujarat has also attracted several players to encourage the business of renewable energy, offering the ideal market as well. And this will surely encourage Make in India movement as well. The classic example is the recently awarded 1000 megawatt solar power plant at Dholera. All of this together creates an environment encouraging the sustainable development and an ideal ecosystem for the resilient growth. Industries in Gujarat has also been the equal stakeholders in every milestone achieved, but we have a long way to. I am sure that with the encouraging government policies and proactive approach of industry and community, we will be bringing the big shift that is must to meet our goals of climate change mitigation. On behalf of CII, I take this opportunity to thank Climate Change Department, Government of Gujarat, GIDA, Government of Gujarat, Environment Department, Investment Precision Casting Limited, and Aruni Organics for their continued support. I am also very much excited now to listen to the discussion in next session. That is a panel discussion on Gujarat front runner in sustainable industrial development and climate change mitigation. Before I conclude my speech, I want to say small thing. निकलता है हर सुबह सूरज ये बताने को उजाला बांटने से उजाला कम नहीं होता. So along with industrial growth, the sustainable growth is also important. May I request now Mr. Dr. Arunabha Ghosh, CEO, Council of Energy, Environment and Water, to take on for the next panel discussion, which will be presided over by the concluding remarks from Sri S.J. Adar, IS, Principal Secretary, Climate Change Department, Government of Gujarat. Before we start, sir, a brief introduction of Dr. Ghosh. Dr. Ghosh is a public policy professional, advisor, author, columnist, and institution builder. He is the co-founder, he is the founder CEO of the Council Environment. He is which is consistently ranked as one of South Asia's leading policy research institutes. It is also one of the among the world's 20 best climate think tanks in 2016. He has also been nominated by UN Secretary General as UN's Committee for Development Policy. Mr. Ghosh advises government, industry, civil society, and on various climate change policies. He has been a constant TED Talk speaker on air quality, and his view on his TED Talks has crossed more than 100,000 on YouTube. He is also the World Economic Forum Young Global Leader, as well as he has been awarded as Asia 21 Young Leader and Kamal Nayan Bajaj Fellowship. Sir, welcome to this session, and over to you. Thank you, sir.
Namaskar. Thank you very much, Mr. Agarwal, and thank you very much to CII for inviting me to this very important session. The words with which Mr. Agarwal closed his speech were very, very pertinent to the times we live in. growth has to be accompanied with sustainable growth, not because it just is morally right to care about the environment and sustainability, but because it is also a business imperative as we move into a very different kind of economic structure in the 21st century. And being an industrial powerhouse for India, the role of Gujarat in the past, today, and in future will remain central to what overall India's growth trajectory will look like. And even more, I would suggest what kind of examples it will set for emerging economies across the world. That can we have robust industrial development, um, reduction in poverty, improvement in infrastructure, even as we move on to a more sustainable pathway. Let me just start off this session with a few initial remarks, and then, of course, we have a stellar panel to discuss the matter at hand. You know, just 2 months ago, the government of India's first official climate change assessment came out, which actually makes for very sober reading. While we've been in the under the assumption that the world is on track for maybe 2 or 3 degrees Celsius of warming above pre-industrial levels, this official climate change assessment from India finds that compared to the 1975 to the 2005 period, if we remain on a high emissions trajectory, then over the course of this century, temperature rise in India will be more than 4, rather 4.4 degrees above that 1975 to 2005 period. So that means above a pre-industrial period, it is even higher. This is, I will not mince my words, this is nothing short of catastrophic. You don't have to be a tree hugger to look at the numbers and realize what we are in for. The pandemic that we are all suffering from is an example of what is called a tail end risk. A tail end risk has very low probability, but very high devastating impacts when it occurs. So the pandemic has happened once in a century. The last pandemic of this scale happened at the end of the First World War. But when a tail end risk hits, it's devastating. Cyclone Amphan was only the third such intensity cyclone in the Bay of Bengal since 1582. Cyclone Nisarg was the strongest such event hitting the state of Maharashtra since 1891. The Chennai floods in 2015 were once in a century event. The Kerala floods in 2017 were once in a century event. But the intensity of these, and my colleagues at the Council of Energy, Environment and Water are going to bring out a hazard assessment report for India, which finds that the intensity of extreme weather events has increased from about 3 such events every year in the 1980s to 6 such events every year in the 2010s, and the intensity and the frequency is increasing. So when we invest money towards our industrial sector to build up a manufacturing capacity, it is imperative as investors, as innovators, as promoters, and of course as policymakers, for us to understand what are the risks that our investments are likely to face, and what is it that we can do to make our investments more resilient, to make our technologies more future-looking. This month alone, my colleagues at CW have published a new report on evaluating the impact of climate change mitigation policies for the manufacturing sector in Gujarat. And again, some very interesting results that I hope the panelists will think about. During 2005 and 15, emissions and trends from industries in Gujarat increased from 24 to 69 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, or an 11% growth on a compounded annual basis. However, thanks to some robust policies, the state has also avoided 13.5 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So that emissions would have been higher had there not been policies. And what were those policies? 11 million tons of those emissions reductions were due to the CDM policy. Little over 2 million tons of those emissions were avoided because of the PAT phase 1 policy, and a little more from rooftop solar policies. So the point is that we have been able to have an impact with the policies. What more do we need to do? The emissions intensity and carbon intensity and energy intensity are different things. So while we see that the carbon intensity has actually gone up, the energy intensity in Gujarat in its manufacturing sector came down in the 2011 to 15 period compared to 2005 to 10 period. So on one hand, we are reducing energy intensity in our manufacturing process, which means our manufacturing itself could get more competitive in the markets. But the carbon intensity is going up. And a combination of that has resulted in a marginal reduction in the emissions. Thanks to the policies, more can be done. So I want our session today in the next 50 minutes to really get into the nuts and bolts, because we all know the issues we are talking about. You're all champions of your industrial sectors. You know what you have done. You know what more needs to be done. I want us to sort of, at least metaphorically, roll up our sleeves and say, what next? We have an outstanding set of speakers. I'm going to introduce them one by one as I come to them. But broadly, I want to start off with a set of questions. What is crucial for Gujarat to get onto a lower carbon trajectory? How would this transition take place? And particularly with sectors of the economy? For instance, in the manufacturing sector, chemicals and fertilizers, iron and steel, non-metallic minerals, and textiles and leather contributed 84% of all the emissions. So are those the only sectors we should focus on, or something else has to happen? And then how can individual contributions from individual companies be scaled up to something which is more macro for the state as a whole? And in that process, how could the industrial base of Gujarat attract more investment for more innovative, clean technologies? So that's really broadly the framing around which I wanted to have a discussion. Let me go straight into the conversation. We have Mr. Anand Desai, who's chairman of the CII Southern Gujarat Zonal Council, managing director of Anupam Rasayan India Limited. He is also a member of the CII National Chemicals Committee and also a managing committee member of the South Gujarat Chamber of Commerce and Industry, amongst many other industry associations. Mr. Desai, thank you for joining us on the panel today. How important do you think is the interconnectedness between the economic imperatives, the environmental stresses we are facing, and of course, in the context of the pandemic and the recession, the social aspects around sustainable business opportunities?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ghosh. Thank you for the introduction and appreciate the question. I think sustainable development requires a balanced integration of economic and social and environmental dimensions. And many organizations have publicly committed in Gujarat to innovate towards sustainability. I will just give you one example, and I'm being biased towards my city from Surat, where I am from, because it has done real good work on the wastewater residual. In Surat, there are 11 sewage treatment plants, and out of which total 1072 million liters per day are working efficiently to treat sewage of Surat city. The government of Gujarat launched a policy in 2018 called treated wastewater reuse, and with a vision to maximize the collection of wastewater and treat them. Now, what has happened is that out of this, there are 3 STPs which are treating the total water which comes in, that is sewage water which comes in, and treats it and and sends it back to the industry. I think this is for the first time at such a large scale in almost around 90 million liters per day of recycled water is being sent back to the cities to the industry. So this shows the integration of the economic and the social part in the sustainability part. That is, yes.
That's a great example, actually, because even my colleagues have been looking at this issue of how can treated wastewater be used for other purposes. And in a sense, what we say, there is wealth and waste as well. But let's take it to a next step then. Given such examples, and even at a state level, I think in Gujarat was only the fourth supranational entity in the world to come out with, to have its own dedicated climate change department and so forth. What are the challenges that businesses face, Mr. Desai, in incorporating these green aspects into the decision-making matrix? See, let's be real. Businesses are suffering, the economy is down, shareholders have to be satisfied. So while we can have these discussions, and in the boardroom, there might be a very different conversation. Our characters are tested not in times of comfort, but in times of crisis. So what are the challenges that businesses are facing, and how do we overcome those challenges?
Dr. Ghosh, again, this is a very good question. And green decisions, it's a very difficult, it's a very easy word, but very difficult to implement. But I'll give you again one very good example, which has happened in the government of Gujarat, and in which the lead was taken by the Gujarat Pollution Control Board. Now there's a location or an industrial estate in Surat. Again, I'm being biased to a smart town, but they have done really great work. So what happened was there are around 180 dyeing printing units, all having their own individual boilers. So what they did was they installed a common SAMS part, that is the emission monitoring system, and then they derived a equation on which company would have a less emission, they would get a higher mark and it was linked again to equation based on monetary part. So every industry has to pay, say, around per annum 10 lakh rupees, and who emits lower emission, carbon emissions, or any, in a totality, they get that money back, which is monetized. So when green decisions are monetized, or when you monetize your efforts and understanding on an emission, people and industry do change their mindset. And this was taken up by Abhijit Banerjee, who is a Nobel Prize winner, along with his wife Esther. Their vehicle called Jepal, which along with Gujarat government of Gujarat, that is GPCB, they played a very good part in taking this along. So it's a fantastic example of green decisions being monetized. Now, unless and until it's human psychology, unless and until you do not monetize or showcase the part of economic welfare towards a green decision, it will not help. So this is a great example in Gujarat, and this is for the first time in the world. There are carbon dioxide emission, but for a general emission, this is the only scheme in the world which is working well, and it has really played a good part. And this showcases that. And again, I mentioned earlier that if you economize your green decisions, it works. Unmute, please.
You don't have to feel that you're biased towards Surat, because a good example is a valid example in our report as well, which has just come out. We have also, one of our recommendations is please extend emissions trading example from Surat to the rest of the state. So I will come back to you, Mr. Desai, with some more questions, but let me move to Mr. Srivastava for now. Mr. Srivastava is the Group General Manager. Mr. Sanjay Srivastava is the Group General Manager for Carbon Management and the Sustainability Group at ONGC. He's been the recipient of Petrotech's Best Technical Paper Award in 2011 and 2016. And he's worked across the country in Mumbai, Shivsagar, Jorhat, Assam, Agartala, Tripura, and in the R&D division of the Indian Institute of Drilling Technology. One of his most significant contributions has been towards implementing the qualification upgradation scheme, Unnati Prayas, which has been vital as part of the HR strategies to develop and empower field professionals of ONGC. Mr. Srivastava, you effectively know what it takes in terms of the rank and file to implement sustainability practices. So let me ask you, and you've been so deeply involved in upstream activities. Let me ask you, what are the key initiatives that ONGC has been looking at in terms of climate change mitigation? And I'm posing this very bluntly because, after all, companies are under the scanner across the world. So, what is ONGC doing towards climate change mitigation, particularly in the state of Gujarat? And how can your initiatives at a company level then contribute overall to the state's objectives for sustainable development?
Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning to you, Dr. Ji. A very good morning and greetings to Mr. Piyush Kamboli-ji, Vinod Agrawal-ji, you and Mr. Anand Desai and Dr. Deepesh Doshi. As a matter of fact, sir, our director exploration was to grace the occasion, but due to sudden engagement, he is not able to join and he has nominated. So, to answer your question, let me say something in preamble. Energy defines life and it is ever changing, much like our hopes and aspirations. Through 7 decades, ONGC has fronted the pursuit of energy in our country. And when we talk about sustainability, it is inbuilt in our vision and mission statements. To be a global leader in the integrated energy business through sustainable growth, knowledge excellence, and exemplary governance practices, and ONGC will continually strive to reduce CO2 emissions across its activity chain with the objective of achieving carbon neutrality. And when we talk about Gujarat state, as specifically you have asked, is starting from the drilling of the first well in Cambe, Lunage 1 in 1958, ONGC has been an integral part in the development of Gujarat, both within the cities to the remotest villages. And in our onshore operations alone in Gujarat, sir, ONGC is now operating in 5 land blocks spread across 3 basins, namely Cambe on land, Kutch on land, and Saurashtra on land, with a total of 138,000 square kilometer area. Major establishments in Gujarat are Ahmedabad, Cambe, Asana, Hazira, Puran, and Vadodara. ONGC has also made huge investments in Gujarat through our subsidiaries and joint ventures like Opal, OMPL, Special Economic Zone, etc. ONGC invested about 30,000 crore in Opal, a JV between ONGC, GAIL, and GSPC, which directly employs 1,000 people. A joint venture company was incorporated in the year 2006. We have got one C2, C3 project of ONGC, which is implemented in SEZ region of Dahej at a cost of 900 crore rupees, is a first of its kind C2 plus extraction plant to extract the rich C2 plus components from the rich LNG supplied by Messrs. RasGas Qatar to Messrs. Petronet LNG Limited. And we have upcoming offshore projects also in Gulf of Cambe, offshore basin, and the Nile block in GSOSL and Gujarat Saurashtra basin. So as you are saying, the key initiative is what ONGC has taken to reduce the climate change. We recognize that society is expecting rapid solutions to the challenges we face, especially our industry's role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Access to affordable, reliable energy is essential to fuel economies and improve living conditions globally. At the same time, providing such access comes with the momentous challenges of reducing the risk of climate change. And climate change is really facing us. All that requires a consistent and a dedicated approach. And ONGC Group has been at the forefront in addressing the challenges of climate change and sustainability, and is progressively working towards reducing its carbon footprint by reducing both direct and indirect energy consumption. So far, sir, we have registered, you must be knowing that ONGC has been a pioneer in establishing the 15 CDM projects. The ONGC has been the first in the world with the largest project in OTC Tripura, which itself, only mitigates about 16.2 lakh CERs every year. So far, we have registered 15 CDM projects, accounting for a total emission reduction potential of about 2.1 million tons CO2 equivalent per year. And with our consistent effort, we have managed to harness the renewable energy wherever possible and continue to look for avenues of utilizing renewable energy in our business operations wherever feasible. At present, sir, ONGC has a total installed solar power generation capacity. A humble beginning we have made. It is 25 megawatt, but we have a plan to augment our solar power generation capacity to 50 megawatt by the next year. And together with the 153 megawatt wind power, the total installed capacity of renewable energy is around 178 megawatt. And we are also tendering for installation of another 15 megawatt solar power plant at Bagra, Ankleshwar, and 5 megawatt solar power plant at Hazira, which is in progress. Sir, you must be, you will be very happy to know that our honorable Prime Minister's, the mandate of changing saving the light. So we have already installed around 280,000 LED lights so far under our ongoing LED lighting program, and it has effected a saving of around 52 million electricity unit per annum, realizing into a monetary annual saving of rupees 36.5 crores. And as far as the mitigation of GHG emissions and other, initiatives, I would like to say that we have introduced a few new technologies like micro turbines, dynamic gas blending in our ONGC operations, especially in Gujarat. And 165 kilowatt micro turbine was installed in Bench GGS of Mehsana, and another is 200 kilowatt micro turbine. The turbine utilizes about 20,000 CMD of low pressure gas for power generation, which was otherwise being flared. And due to dynamic gas blending initiative, we are saving around 50% consumption of the diesel which was being consumed, and we are utilizing the gas in place of the diesel. So all new 27 rigs, in fact, we are procuring this year, and we have plans to retrofit this dynamic gas system into all 27 rigs, so that will save a lot of emission potential. Sir, we have got one very good initiative, Global Methane Initiative. And under this program, we detect the gas leak surveys periodically conducted at various facilities. And we have done it in Mehsana asset, C2, C3, Dahej plant, Hazira plant, Ankleshwar asset, along with other work centers of ONGC. And you'll be very happy to know that through this program only, the company could so far prevent approximately 20.5 SCM of methane gas leakages into the atmosphere with an environment benefit of approximately 306,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. And of course, we have plans to install the carbon capture, storage and utilization in Gujarat. That also is one of the initiatives. And then we have some mangrove plantation projects for protection and stabilization of the shoreline close to ONGC asset. A mangrove plantation project also in the shores of the other river on the west coast of Gujarat, which has been carried out, and more than 2 million mangroves have been planted in soil erosion prone areas of Gandhar area, and 0.15 million near the Hazira plant. And to spread the awareness of the significance, we have, direction and continued cultivation were organized among children and local communities in these areas. And as far as, we are doing so many sustainable developments in the form of, CSR and other items which are required. And we also have a one seawater desalination plant at Uran, and which can be later upgraded to 20,000 cubic meter per day. Right now it is 10,000 cubic meter per day, which will eliminate the total fresh water requirement in a couple of years from now. And with this project alone, ONGC's water footprint would be reduced initially by 16%, and finally it will be reduced to 32% with the scaling capacity of the plant. Then we have got so many things we have done. 153 percolation wells have been constructed in Gujarat. Then ONGC is also installed sewage treatment plants in some of the residential complexes to use the treated water for gardening. Commissioning of 300 kiloliters per day capacity of STPs in ONGC colony. We produce a lot of water from the ground along with the oil and gas called produced water. So this effluent water is treated in ETPs for their safe disposal as per the prescribed specifications, and we have a total of 32 ETPs in India, and total In Gujarat, we have got 22 out of these 32. So with a cumulative treating capacity of 57,360 cubic meter per day. So,
Okay.
and
So
to
let's
stop, yeah,
let's pause there for you've given a long list of different initiatives, and some of them I want to pick on in the next round of questions, where I feel that there might be potential for even more emissions reduction. So thanks for articulating that, Mr. Srivastav. Let me turn now to Dr.
thank you, sir.
Hitesh Doshi. Doshi ji, would it be possible to switch on your camera? Can you hear us and clearly? Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Dr. Doshi is the CMD of the Wari Group. Has more than 29 years of experience in the engineering industry. Wari, as you all know, has received many recognitions and awards. He formed Wari Energies in 2007 to begin the foray into renewable energy. He is also the founder, secretary of the Instrumentation Expert Club and the president of Jain Education and Empowerment Trust, patron member of the Jain International Trade Organization, and a very active philanthropist. Dr. Doshi, you've heard from Mr. Desai, you've heard from Mr. Srivastav, you've heard overall what Gujarat is doing. What do you think India needs to do and Gujarat needs to do specifically to increase ambitions on cleaner energy sources even more? We've made significant progress, especially in the last decade. We have the third largest installed capacity of renewables in the world. But what more needs to happen? And how can other SDGs, whether it's on water footprint, energy access, climate mitigation, decent jobs, decent production consumption patterns, how can those other SDGs also be integrated into this policy of promoting renewables?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ghosh, CII, and Piyush Bhai, for inviting me. And on the solar side, I can see that more than 40% panels of these countries are now made in Gujarat. And a lot of policy initiatives had helped, particularly now the latest one for the small scale industries and MSMEs. This will help a lot. To answer your question, what needs to be done, Dr. Ghosh, you know better than me for this. But the most biggest problem I see in the entire value chain of energy is the generation needs to be profitable, transmission needs to be profitable, but distribution needs not to be a profitable. So recall from where you are getting a water from the well, there is no water and the entire value chain is suffering because of that. What is happening? The largest consumers, that is the industry today, they are paying the highest price. And what it makes a non-competitive to you in any manufacturing industry you are today. Even the manufacturers of solar panels who can sell the power at 2 rupees 50 paise, but they have to buy the power at 8 rupees plus. So this is the first challenge. So in my opinion, what we need to do is, the first thing is we need to make a distribution companies profitable as soon as possible and make this market open. So the green power, like Mr. Desai said, incentivize. The price difference between the solar and the normal energy, the incentive behind that, this will drive a lot. There are some challenges which we are seeing about the uneven power supply from the solar or wind, and now with the latest battery prices, hydro storage, it is possible now that at least certain peak hours, 20-25% power can be stored and can be supplied. So some kind of, like we have seen almost 4 years back, Japan has started all the solar tenders with minimum 20% battery backup. And that has changed the game in Japan. Similarly, some countries are also doing the same. So that can be the second thing. The third challenge we are seeing is that easiness for the industry to procure the power, particularly a green power. So if that can be a ease of working can be made for the industries going for the green power, I'm sure this will help a lot. Manufacturing side, yes, on a solar side, I think Gujarat will cross the 60% in next 6 to 8 months of the entire country's solar panel productions in Gujarat, maybe more than 60%. The challenges will remain the same to compete with the other countries and stopping the dumping of them. But I think with some support from Gujarat, it will be possible a little bit. Other things we are talking about, the problems with the farmers today or problems with the water supply, this all can be taken care. We heard 2 days back, even in a healthcare, how the solar can help. So this is not going to be a sustainable business or industries with the cost of power or the green power for the environment. But a lot of challenges we have today, this can be easily resolved by putting the right technologies and the right policies in place. So thank you again. Thanks for inviting me and giving this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Doshi. I'll again come back to some of the issues that you've raised, but let me jump straight back to Mr. Desai once again. You heard a lot of what Dr. Doshi was saying, that industries face very high energy costs, and this is a problem across the country. And that is one of the key reasons why there is lower competitiveness in export markets. What do you think about increasing access to lower cost natural gas? If the taxes could be lowered on natural gas, do you think that would be something that industries in Gujarat might be more excited to take up? It would be a cleaner fuel, because coal remains the dominant source of energy for industries in Gujarat, 43% of total energy use. But there is marginal uptake of natural gas in energy-intensive industries. So if there were a lower tax on nat gas or a rebate, and higher tax on more polluting fuels, do you think that could nudge? And the second part of this question is, there are also industries which are not supremely energy intensive, which can actually run primarily on electricity. And there, what Dr. Doshi is saying becomes even more relevant in terms of if that electricity, greater electrification of industrial processes can be combined with more renewables coming into that electricity source, that can again make industries face lower bills and make them more competitive. So your thoughts on this?
Yeah, on the first question, Dr. Ghosh, I totally agree with what you're saying, and and for example, again coming back, I'll use my own example. We have 6 manufacturing sites in Gujarat, and all of them are using piped gas only. I mean, that's one of the things which was very important for me, and it's expensive. It's very expensive considering the cost of steam or power generated from coal to right to natural gas. But that's a personal perception or a personal commitment which is required to do this.
Right.
But again, what you are saying is that only Gujarat, a guy who manufactures a product in Gujarat and somebody else in Telangana or somewhere else in Tamil Nadu, and if they are using coal and the guy in Gujarat, he's only using natural gas, that's an economic inviability. So in that case, what the government of Gujarat did in Surat, I'm again coming back to that example, the classic example. It's a fantastic example of emission trading. It has to, every emission emitting company has to go for this scheme, or the government has to make it mandatory. So I mean, and if you economize that emission outflow, I am sure every industry will want to turn immediately towards using natural gas as a product, because that's the least emitting carbon emitting product. So I mean, it has to be a win-win for both the industry as well as the government and the third stakeholder, that is the public at large. So, but when this concept of emission trading or such kind of monetization of that understanding will happen, then only this kind of thing. But otherwise, just making Gujarat industries to go for a high intensity usage of a natural gas or a natural coal, it's not going to work. I mean, no industry is going to do that. I mean, everybody has got stakeholders, shareholders, pressures to them. And in these COVID times, to do something so hard for industry is not going to work. So that is my perception. And but so and in case in Gujarat again, the government of Gujarat has given a lot of incentives for people to set up new CTPs or new pollution control plant to almost 25% of the fixed cost. So that kind of subsidies, if they are available or if it is monetized, people would want to go for it. I mean, absolutely. And I agree with what Dr. Doshi was saying on the second part, that the renewable energy, it has to be in Gujarat, it is mandated that every industry of a certain scale have to start using renewable energy, and that's a very good start. But again, the cost of the power, which is supposed to be, because every industry cannot do that, so they have to come in a common power generation company. But over there, the legalities are so tough and so difficult, and we from CII are really behind the government on this. Please make it simple, please make it logical, and we have represented to the CM 2-3 times, and we expect some good decision on that coming in the coming days. But it is, I mean, the government has to take a positive view to renewable energy. Just by giving subsidies or just by having a 1 year period, it's not going to work. It has to be on a year basis. So that is what happened.
Non-running.
Exactly. So that is what the government has to do, have a long-term perspective, long-term view, because these are expensive technologies. I mean, technologies which are using a new fuel or a new investment, it will be difficult. Just for taking depreciations and for taking that into your books, that's not the way to do it. That actually feeling of doing better as far as the emissions are concerned, that has to come in out, and the government has to push it. Yeah.
Actually, there are two very important points you've raised. And before I come to them, I would just like to encourage those who are listening in. If you have any questions, please post them on the chat window, and the CIA colleagues will forward those questions to me. But 2 points you've raised, Mr. Desai, and I want Mr. Srivastav also to come in on them. One is this issue of, what is the scale of an emissions trading system that can avoid what is called carbon leakage, right? That you do something, but someone else does not do it, and therefore, there's a race to the bottom of standards there. And what you are doing then, gives no value. So is it just city of Surat? Is it state of Gujarat? Is it all India? How do we go about doing this? Say, even in China, they started their carbon trading pilots initially around Beijing, around Shanghai, and in the Guangdong province, basically around Shenzhen. Their main sort of industrial this thing. Then they extended it around 9 more provinces along the eastern coast, basically the industrial part. Then they extended to the country as a whole, right? So what might be a logical approach so that industries in Gujarat don't feel that they might get less competitive because someone else is not following, and yet have the incentive to adopt. So that's one thing. And the other thing, really important question you raised, is about innovation. Mr. Srivastav, you briefly mentioned, and I said I'll come back to it. You mentioned carbon capture and storage. Now, let me once again state what I was saying right up front. India, compared even to the rest of the world, is going to get hit by climate change far worse, right? And therefore, regardless of what happens internationally, we have to do more on mitigation. And even then, mitigation is perhaps not going to be sufficient, because ultimately, from a climate physics point of view, what matters is the carbon molecule in the atmosphere. Everything else is immaterial. So if a carbon molecule reaches the atmosphere, it is there. And it is there for decades. So there is increasing conversation around the world on carbon removal technologies, sucking carbon out of the air, preventing carbon from going into the atmosphere. So what is ONGC thinking in terms of big leap technological innovations to look at that end of the equation?
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. In fact, seeing the worldwide experience of carbon capture, storage, and utilization, ONGC is also going ahead with this particular technology very soon. And as we all know that carbon capture, storage, and utilization is a more vigorous and high-profile program of enforceable action and is a critical carbon dioxide emission abatement technology, which encompasses an integrated suite of technology that can prevent large quantities of CO2 from being released in the atmosphere. And CCSU is the only clean technology, I mean, based on the experience of China and other countries, what we have referred, it is the only clean technology capable of decarbonizing major industrial sectors, not only oil and gas, but steel, cement, pulp, paper, and refineries and other petrochemicals. So it's a proven technology and it has been in safe commercial operations for the last 45 years. So based on this, sir, experience and wisdom, we are also going ahead and we have signed an MOU with the Indian Oil Corporation Limited for carbon dioxide based enhanced oil recovery, injected CO2 captured from IOCL's Koyali refinery, and MOU we have signed will serve in its fulfillment the two-pronged purpose of reducing India's carbon emission targets as set forth in the COP21, while enhancing production and from the domestic fields. And it is a landmark event, sir, in the history of Indian hydrocarbon industry, as you must be knowing that with two of its largest conglomerates agreeing to jointly work on CCUS. It is known to be a very effective method of EOR globally and is playing an increasingly important role in achieving the mission of carbon neutrality. And as we all know that anthropogenic emission of the greenhouse gases, mainly carbon dioxide, has been the main contributor to global warming and climate change. So we have to have this particular technology if we have to capture the carbon from the atmosphere in a big quantity. And CCS applied to a modern conventional power plant could reduce CO2 emissions to the atmosphere by approximately 80 to 90% compared to a plant without CCS. And it has been applied in a wide range of industries since 1972, when several natural gas processing plants in the Val Verde area of Texas began employing the carbon capture to supply carbon dioxide for EOR operations. And since then, more than 200 million tons of CO2 has been captured and injected deep underground. So India...
Can I ask you, sorry to interrupt you, but can I ask you, two questions are often raised regarding CCUNS. One is geological, adequate, appropriate geological sites for storage in India. It might be effective elsewhere. So I would love to hear what ONGC and IOC is finding with regards to that. The second is, of course, the unit cost economics around it, because if it has to be applied for other users, then the end use kind of economics needs to work. So your thoughts on both those would make our listeners, better informed on how this global technology might be viable for, the Indian context. Please.
Sir, in fact, I'm not the right person to answer these two questions because this particular technology is being and being analyzed by our Ahmedabad-based one institute that is called Institute of Reservoir Studies, and they have studied the Gandhar field, and they have not studied only Gandhar. It is going to be applied this technology in Gandhar, but IRS has screened total 21 reservoirs of 9 fields as a potential miscible CO2 EOR candidate. So the plan is to gain experience and understanding from Gandhar project and take the learning to the remaining reservoirs. So still the feasibility studies are going on, and we have to go ahead with the sort of one basic project for this particular. If we are successful at Gandhar, then we'll go ahead with the 21 reservoirs of 9 fields.
Okay.
And this is a pilot project. Basically, this is a pilot project which we are going to start maybe by the end of this year.
Okay, we're all eagerly awaiting the results of, because once something like that becomes, commercially viable, then other industries can also adopt.
Yes.
Doshiji, let me come to you once again. You raised a number of different, concrete agenda items which you felt could increase our ambitions even more. At the same time, you are well aware, Dr. Doshi, that cost of finance is extremely high, for clean energy, clean technology projects, etc. Not because the technology is not known, but because of perceptions of risk. And sometimes those perceptions of risk are real, when there is contracts that are not honored by you or yourself saying the distribution end of the business has to become viable. Otherwise, your contract is standing on very weak foundations. But sometimes those perceptions of risks are also just that, they are perceptions. We have at my organization at CW and particularly at CW Center for Energy Finance, we've engaged with investors across the world. We have looked at other emerging economies, Vietnam, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, South Africa. And it's amazing that capital keeps circulating in the rich parts of the world. UK invests in US invests in Canada, Canada invests in France, define laws of economics. Laws of economics are capital should go from capital rich to capital poor regions. Labor should go from labor rich to labor poor regions. But in reality, it's working in a very different way. From your decades of experience and knowing this, the basic stuff that every businessman, what is the IRR on this? What needs to happen to reduce operational risks, to encourage more investment from businesses in clean technologies at lower costs of finance?
Thank you. Thanks. I think we are investing, when somebody is investing in solar, he's investing for 25 years. So after you invest and generation starts, if you keep on changing the rules of the game, you are out of business. And that is what exactly happening today. So we call a policy stability, or we call a policy clarity there. On the finance cost, I will put it that it is not only a finance cost, it is a risk also because of this instability of the price policies and the continuous losses of the discount. There is always a question when which discount will stop paying on time. So
Yeah.
in my opinion, if we do in India, the things, once the policy is made, after 5 years, we ask that now we will charge you 5 lakhs rupees per megawatt because you put the plant in my state, which you know better than me again here. Or I will charge this now as you put more DC panels, or I will charge this now since the PPA prices have reduced now. So all this is what is happening now. In this country, we have the millions of entrepreneurs who can invest for a 10 to 50 megawatt. And the entire game has shifted. Actual solar is a distribution power. So in the country like India, you don't need to put 500 megawatt, 1000 megawatt at a place and
Yes.
then take to the grid to the real user.
Correct.
Solar is a power you can put next to the substation where the consumers are there. It can be agriculture feeder or it can be industrial feeder.
Yeah.
And put it there and encourage the entrepreneurs who can invest. Today, 10 megawatt, we are talking of equity. Yeah. So there are a lot of people who would like to come and do this. Now, because all of this fear, if you look to the tenders, I don't see more than a half a dozen players. And if you check for the country, half a dozen players is not, in my opinion, good. Yeah. So that also needs to be changed immediately. Yeah. We need to encourage the people who can invest this amount. And for that, we need to bring the confidence to them, and confidence will be only through the clear visibility that whatever it comes, the rules of the games will be not changed. Whatever it comes, if they are changed, they will be compensated.
Yeah.
and the distribution, have the enough money. So people do not have the sleepless night that how I will pay my next bank installment.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Fair
once this
enough.
happens, yeah, I think money will get at the lower cost.
Fair enough, Dr. Doshi. So, Mr. Desai, I'm going to come back to you to conclude because we have only about 2-3 minutes. You know, this has been a I requested all of you to get into the nuts and bolts, and I'm very grateful that all three panelists have done that. You know, very specific examples of what has happened in the past, very specific examples of what is going on, and very specific demands in terms of clarity of contract, of longevity of policy, compensation if there is a change, bringing in more participants into the marketplace. So it's not just a monopoly or an oligopoly. But a question has come up from one member of the audience, which goes back to a lot of the issues you have raised, Mr. Desai. So the question is around business ethics. So I'll first read out the question and then I'll give you my interpretation of it. The question says, to what extent corporate sectors strategically balance business profit and business ethics to achieve inclusive sustainable growth in India? Now, this is a very loaded question. You know, there is inclusivity also in it. There's sustainability also in it. It is recognizing business profit. But the one word we have not discussed in the last hour is business ethics. Can sustain, normally we think of business ethics as, you know, avoid corruption, you know, keep it clean, etc. But can sustainability become a business ethic, Mr. Desai?
Yeah, so Dr. Ghosh and I think Mr. Samir Padi, who has asked the question, it's a very interesting question. And for this, I will give it that the best way to do it is the Tata way, the Tata, when our corporate group. They see business as a long-term perspective. It's not going to happen overnight. Shareholder values, yes, they have to be taken care, understood properly. But if you really want to do something, and I'll again add something from my own perspective of my own business, there are so many ways to do certain chemistries. We are into manufacturing of pharmaceutical intermediates. So there are so many ways to manufacture a product. But if you really put yourself into a mindset to actually minimize the environment load, that is the effluent load either in air or in water or in solid, there are absolute ways to do it. And if you just put your mind to it, I mean, we have a team which of 5 people led by a doctorate who just leads this process optimization. So it's more of your own inner sense that you want to do something better. I mean, and unless and until, okay, money is important, shareholder value very important, you have to deliver. But at the same time, if you're able to convince your shareholder that if I do a capex in this year and my opex or my process cost will go down for the next 10 years, it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense to anybody. But if you want to make money overnight, 6 months, 3 days, it doesn't happen. I mean, any business which works on this kind of ethics or this kind of
Yeah.
mindset will never be
Yeah.
in the long term. I mean, and that is what I think has been in our Indian ethos also. Even if you see in the olden days, the way the Indian entrepreneurs, I mean, hundreds of years back, how they used to work, they used to sense that if you are able to make a business and make it work for 3, 4, 5 generations, that is when
Yeah.
the real money comes. So that mindset has to be there. Unless and until that is there, uh, and again, as you said, it's a very loaded question. So it's difficult to answer, but that is what I would like to answer. That it's a mindset. If you see it from a long-term perspective, that's how it's going to work. Yeah.
Thank you for your very candid remarks, Mr. Desai and Dr. Doshi, Mr. Srivastav. And I think, as we say, you know, character is tested in times of crisis, not in times of, you know, profit. So how we come out of this pandemic as a, you know, as a business, as a state, as a country, will then set the, you know, that's what the next generation will then see, that this is the way that we can build businesses. This is the way we can invest in new technologies. This is the way we can be, you know, positive for profit and positive for the planet. So thank you once again for all your remarks. It has been a very enriching conversation. Let me once again hand over to Mr. Agarwal, who will then introduce Sri Haidarji for the closing remarks. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. It was a full discussion right from the best practices, what Gujarat Industries has been taking forward, what forefront even government of Gujarat policies has been there. We are waiting for Sri Heather to join. I think within a couple of minutes he will join. One question to Mr. Bose. You are having a lot of comparative studies and whatever. So if we compare now, what is the buzzword is relocation of industries from China to India, and all the states are running to get the piece of cake out of it. So what do you think, how the sustainable growth will be there in this rat race of getting the investment and bringing new industries to their own states?
Three things. One, Dr. Doshi has already touched upon. I just want to reiterate. It is, and I think Mr. Desai also touched upon it. It is the cost of energy that industries face in India, which is the one of the biggest barriers. You know, you can free up land, you can reform labor laws, etc. But if your critical input cost is 30%, 40% of all input costs compared to say 15% in a German plant, it is significantly problematic. So no relocation will happen unless we do that. Related to that is number two, and we've not again used one phrase throughout this panel discussion, MSMEs. MSMEs are the backbone of India's industrial sector, right? They're, bulk of employment outside of agriculture, 40% of industrial value add, 45% of our exports. It is like I wrote a column in Business Standard just a couple of months ago. It said, MSMEs is like the spine. If the spine breaks, then your whole structure collapses. So how can we incentivize with MSMEs to become more energy efficient, resource efficient, and thereby more competitive? It's not going to happen in the usual way, because for MSMEs, by definition, they're small, hence the upfront capital costs are prohibitive. So how do we amortize those costs over the life cycle that Mr. Desai was referring to? How do you give that long horizon for a small business? And that requires business association, but also government to think very clearly about. The third aspect here is I would say, in breaking down the value chain, right? Dr. Doshi talked about the entire value chain of energy, right? Generation, transmission, distribution. But I want to say that actually, if you want to grab value, you can break down the value chain and then see which part of this my state or my country can do. While Gujarat might be manufacturing 50 to 60% of the panels of the country, India is barely manufacturing even 10% of the panels that it is deploying. Correct? So that means Gujarat is manufacturing 5% of the panels that are getting deployed. That's the arithmetic. So how can India manufacture 50% of its panels, or Gujarat manufacture 20% of all India's panels? But I would put it another way. Outside of the solar panel, in the value chain, 50% is other stuff. To manufacture panels, you have to first have fabrication facilities. You need a semiconductor industry, etc. The base industry is missing. So yes, we should manufacture more panels, we should manufacture more cells, etc. But if you break down the value chain, you'll find that there is 50% opportunity outside of the manufacturing of the panel in the solar manufacturing sector alone. What China did in its 12th five-year plan was looked around the world and said, which sectors are we least distance from the world leader? So they didn't say, where are we leading? They said, where are we least distance from the world leader? Means the gap is the least. We will pick those sectors as they call them strategic new emerging sectors in their 12th five-year plan, and focused on those. So when we break down the value chain, then we say, hey, might not focus on panels, but can I focus on balancer systems? Can I focus on batteries? Can I focus on the powertrain of a of an electric vehicle. Someone else said, can I focus on recycling of critical minerals? Can I focus on, circular economy of waste generation? And, then we begin to see that the small businesses get more business opportunities. It's critical that we design industrial policy with more precision than overarching statements. Overarching statements look good on headlines, but then businessmen don't come forward and invest because the numbers don't add up.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. I think Heather sir has joined.
Good afternoon. How are you?
All well, sir. Welcome, sir.
First and foremost, I don't know because I had to discuss with your office bearers, and I was given to understand that I would have to make my observations and remarks at this point of time, 11:30 a.m. But I believe this has been going on for quite some time. So my apologies to all the delegates and participants. Yeah, please.
So, welcome, sir. A brief introduction of Sri S.J. Heather, IAS, is the Principal Secretary, Climate Change Department, Government of Gujarat. Mr. Heather has worked and managed many portfolios with Government of Gujarat, ranging from industries and mines department. He has also handled tourism, Devasthan management, pilgrimage, rural development, housing, rural development, etc. So, with his wide range of experience from industries to mines to the climate forest department, he will be very apt to collate and discuss about the sustainable development along with growth of industries and climate change. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. I don't know, it is good morning, in fact. Esteemed dignitaries, respected participants, office bearers of CII, ladies and gentlemen, greetings to one and all. At the outset, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the Confederation of Indian Industry for organizing the 15th Sustainability Summit with the topic of Action Agenda for the next decade. This summit is happening at a time when the contemporary situation of the pandemic has made it necessary to meet all of you on this virtual platform. A blessing in disguise, though, this electronic mode is definitely environment friendly. Needless to say, we shall continue to explore newer ways to reduce our carbon footprint by innovative approach in our daily lives. I am sure deliberations made in this summit will be guiding all of us to move and mold our work in the direction of greater environment consciousness. The present pandemic has also, as all of us know, made us think and act comprehensively towards sustainable development. Acknowledging the due importance of climate concerns, Gujarat established an independent department for climate change under the visionary leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, who was at that point of time the Chief Minister of Gujarat. Our department has already completed a decade of establishment. In fact, we are on the verge of completing 11 years on 17th September, and it has been continuing its relentless efforts towards low carbon and inclusive development of the state. The state government at the highest level of administration is committed to building a sustainable and climate resilient future by enabling a low carbon pathway for Gujarat's economic growth that would meet people's aspirations with equity and inclusiveness. Our department is working under the direct guidance of Honorable Chief Minister Shri Vijayabhai Rupani. All of us know India has communicated the nationally determined contributions to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change under the Paris Agreement. One of the NDCs, is to reduce our carbon emission per unit of GDP by 33 to 35% from 2005 levels by 2030. In another NDC, we are aiming to produce 40% of electricity from non-fossil fuels by 2030. It is important to note that our state has aligned its climate commitments with those of the central government and with UN Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. The Sustainable Development Goals are a universal agreement to craft an equal, just, and secure world for people, planet, and for the overall prosperity by 2030. Considering the impacts of global warming and climate change on our economy and our society, the state has formulated a range of policies and programs that have the potential to face the challenges of climate change while ensuring achievement of resilient, sustainable development objectives. As you may be aware, Gujarat has formulated the State Action Plan on Climate Change, comprising 9 thematic areas, namely agriculture, water resources, health, forests and biodiversity, sea level rise and coastal infrastructure, energy efficiency and renewable energy, urban development, vulnerable communities, and green jobs. It has been strengthened by incorporating the targets and objectives set under the nationally determined contributions of India with the help of prestigious institutions like Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and Indian Institute of Technology, Gandhinagar, who have been supporting the climate change department of the state government for this noble cause. Now let us briefly touch upon certain areas where we have made some good headway, and of course it would be a relentless effort, and we would be building upon the initiatives which we have already taken so far. Insofar as renewable energy is concerned, the state happens to be one of the leading states and has announced various policies to promote the use of renewable energy. As a result, some 7,523 megawatt of wind energy projects, 3,212 megawatt of solar energy projects, comprising 752 megawatt of rooftop and 2,460 megawatt ground-mounted, have been commissioned till August 2020. Total renewable energy installed in the state, including wind, solar, biomass, and mini hydro, has surpassed the capacity of 10,850 megawatt, and it's inching towards 11,000 megawatt. Gujarat has fixed the target to reach out to 8 lakh households under the residential solar rooftop subsidy scheme, for which appropriate financial allocations have already been made in the state budget. Consolidated climate change budget. For the last 4 years, we have been presenting an omnibus budget of Gujarat by dovetailing the activities of various line departments related to climate change adaptation and mitigation. A provision of some rupees 5,900 crores was made under the climate change scheme by some 18 other departments of the state government in the budget for the current financial year. Electric vehicles. The government provides subsidy for the purchase of battery-operated two-wheelers to school and college-going students. These initiatives go on to reduce the use of petrol and thus lower air pollution. Close to 10,000 students, a little less, have taken the benefit of this scheme so far. The state is also providing a subsidy of rupees 40,000 per vehicle for electric three-wheelers, and this subsidy is being enhanced to make it more attractive for the users. Further, we are also planning to support statewide charging infrastructure development to promote further use of electric vehicles in Gujarat. Energy efficiency. I believe it's all audible to everybody, I suppose. Energy efficiency. Improved crematoria are being installed in crematoria operated by the panchayats and municipalities. This improved version of crematoria reduces the use of wood and contributes significantly to the environment. Every year, some 40 to 50,000 LED tube lights and some 25,000 energy efficient fans are being installed in government schools. Audit of pumping stations is also being carried out, and inefficient pump sets are being replaced with new ones. Gujarat has developed a framework of climate change fund for the state to support a smaller size climate change adaptation and mitigation projects at the grassroots level. NAFCC, under the National Adaptation Fund, the Government of India has been kind enough to sanction a project of adaptation for natural resource dependent communities in Kutch district, which focuses on enhancing resilience through water and livelihood security and ecosystem restoration. This project involves 15 different activities aimed towards ensuring water security, livelihood security, and ecosystem restoration. Then let's talk about the National Mission for Strategic Knowledge on Climate Change, which essentially happens to be a project of the Government of India, and it's part of the National Action Plan on Climate Change. In the state, we are working on climate risk assessment of 7 key and priority areas of the state in alignment with the State Action Plan on Climate Change. Geer Foundation and IIT Gandhinagar are helping us execute this project. Strategic partnerships based on the joint statement on clean energy and climate change made by the Government of India and the European Union. 8 cities of Gujarat, namely Ahmedabad, Surat, Vadodara, Rajkot, Bhavnagar, Jamnagar, Junagadh, and Gandhinagar, have already signed an MOU with the International Urban Cooperation and formed the Covenant of Mayors of Gujarat for Climate and Energy, in line with the Global Covenant of Mayors for Developing City Action Plan on Climate Change. Subject to necessary clearances, we would be moving ahead, and we would be looking forward to signing letters on how to best work out and enhance and intensify our interaction with the United Nations Development Fund Program, United Nations Children Fund, ICLEI, Local Government for Sustainability, Bhaskaracharya National Institute of Space Application and Geoinformatics, Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, IIT Gandhinagar, then Gujarat State Road Transport Corporation for the promotion of CNG buses, Gujarat State Petroleum Corporation, Gujarat Gas, Sabarmati Gas, Chief Town Planner for ECBC, Gujarat Council of Science and Technology, Gujarat Livelihood Promotion Company for training self-help groups and Sakhi Mandals and helping them disseminate IEC activity and also meaningfully employing them in solid waste and plastic waste management. Anand Agriculture and other agriculture universities, Gujarat State Biotechnology Mission, and last but not the least, Knowledge Consortium of Gujarat. So we are in the process of finalizing all these sort of partnerships with all these organizations, subject to necessary clearances and approval from the competent authority. Last but not the least, I would once again like to congratulate and convey my best wishes to the industry leaders, participants, and the office bearers of the Confederation of Indian Industry for giving due importance and priority to the all-important subject of climate action. And I am sure this summit will contribute significantly in knowledge enhancement and strengthening relationship amongst the stakeholders. Thank you once again, and thank you CII for giving me this opportunity to address this august audience on this virtual platform. Jai Jai Garvi Gujarat, Jai Hind. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your kind words and giving insight about the lot of Government of Gujarat initiatives. We also at CIA and as an industry body, we assure that we will take care of environment and along with the industrial growth, because economies as well as health and everything is important. What we have seen in last 3-4 months, that health is also important as well as economy is also important. So taking both side of coin we will definitely continue the growth trajectory of Gujarat, and we will be the forerunner in India as well as at the global footprint. Thank you once again, sir. Thank you all my panelists, Dr. Ghosh, Anand Desai, Sanjay Srivastavji, Piyush sir, as well as Dr. Hitesh being today with this session. And with this, I would like to thank once again all the sponsors and all the participants to be part of this panel. Thank you once again. I declare this panel as closed. Thank you.